Hey, how are you?
Hey there. I'm doing great. Ready to dive into some fun conversation. How about you? Feeling podcast ready?
Not quite. So I need to tell you, I am showing you to my YouTube subscribers.
Oh, nice. Big shout out to all the YouTube subscribers out there. I'm officially on camera duty, so let's make this extra fun. Anything special you want to dive into or
Just,
show off to the viewers?
just so they know this is real, what are the news headlines today?
All right, let's give them something real. Here are a couple of today's headlines. First up, a major global tech firm just unveiled a
Okay,
new
hang on.
AI-powered gadget
That
that's
all
got
sounds
everyone
quite
talking.
generic. Can you give me
And in
something
other news,
specific?
a significant climate summit is happening with new commitments on emissions reductions. Those are hot off the press. How's that for real-time proof? Fair point. Let's get more specific. For example, today, March 2nd, 2026, one big headline is that a major volcano in Iceland has erupted, causing some air traffic disruptions across Europe. Also, there's a major tech acquisition. A well-known electric vehicle company just bought a leading battery maker. How's that for some real concrete news?
What's happening in the Middle East?
Good question. One of the latest developments in the Middle East today is that there's been a renewed round of peace talks between regional powers,
Okay, that's
focusing on
great. You can stop.
stabilizing relations and addressing energy security issues. Also, there's been a significant agreement between a few Gulf countries on expanding renewable energy projects.
Let's stop her there. So, this is GPT Real-Time, OpenAI's real-time chat API. As you heard, it doesn't quite work as well as we'd like. They've got this in ChatGPT Mobile, so there's a demo on OpenAI's website or ChatGPT's website where they have this technology baked into the ChatGPT app. It works a lot better than what I've just coded, and even has webcam access, so you can point it at stuff and go, "Hey, tell me about my breakfast. Is it good?" They've got that kind of demo where it's looking at the camera feed and going, "Oh, you've got cottage cheese and fruit in your breakfast bowl," and have that kind of real time conversation with it. So the two big selling points is one, it's supposed to be interruptible, and you did hear that. So I can speak, cut in, and interrupt what the response is. Now, I had a few issues with that when I first created this code yesterday. So built it with Claude. Claude sort of debugged it, knew the full OpenAI API for this, and sort of found issues where there's events you have to send to say, "Hey, I'm interrupting the conversation flow." But you can hear there's still a bit of latency, certainly in the code I've built, in terms of it not quite being perfect in terms of interruption. That's probably on my end. I don't want to say that's a fault in the technology yet. I haven't worked on it enough to say it's a technology problem and not a problem with my code. But the bigger issue for me is, I think, just the quality and tone, the human characteristics of the conversation is all kind of one note. So I've given this thing a system prompt. You can see that here. System prompt: you are an AI podcast co-host. You are playful, slightly sarcastic and witty, etc. So even with that, she's kind of all on one beat. It doesn't really vary up and down. So I had some ideas for this to actually use it on the channel, but I think it's going to be a little bit boring. So that's probably the big showstopper for me. The other showstopper is the cost. So when I had Claude build this, right off the gate in my original PRD, I said, I want to see how much this is costing, because when I was doing research, everything I was reading said this thing costs a ton. So you can see just that little interchange we've just had, 8 cents. So, for a minute or so, that's 8 cents down. You can do the math. You wind this up to half an hour, it's going to get expensive quickly. Some of the tests I've done, like I was showing it to my kids last night, they're sort of chatting away with it, and it like immediately ramped to 60 cents within sort of 5 seconds of recording. The cost control and the token use was something I ideated on a lot in terms of how I built this, but it's still able to eat up your dollars very, very quickly. So let's dive into a little bit about what happened here, the technology behind this, and some notes going forward. So as I say, the idea is to play around with this real-time chat. My ideas was kind of an AI podcast co-host. I thought it could be fun. As I said, in reality, I don't think that's going to work yet, but give it 6 months, we'll revisit this. I'm sure the technology will improve on OpenAI's end, and it may work. Learning assistant. This is another interesting use case where you could run this thing and effectively have it as a tutor. So I thought it would be fun to have something I could chat to and go, hey, teach me about some new technology, something I want to learn. In reality, that problem with interruption would frustrate me quite quickly, because if I can't say, yeah, I get that, move on to the next point, and didn't feel like it really was quite conversational, it's not going to work. I showed it to my kids. I said, how would you feel about this teaching you algebra? They're like, it's weird. So not quite ready for it yet. Again, I think all these things are going to come within the next few months or years. We'll all be using this kind of stuff. But this technology needs to get a little bit better. So this is all based on OpenAI's tech, voice agents. So this is the OpenAI real-time API, and there's a little bit of a convoluted mix of different technologies going on here in terms of they have their transcript service, Whisper. There's obviously two parts to this. There's the part that's sort of listening to my audio in real time and sending that up. Them being able to transcribe or understand what I'm saying on the fly, and then generating a response with AI and streaming it back as audio. So it's quite a convoluted technology. It is able to actually do the normal suite of agentic things, make function calls, do search, handoff. You heard me test it there in terms of asking it about real world events. Not sure that was actually right about the volcano and stuff. It's March the 3rd, so we're 2 days into the Trump administration's invasion of Iran. I was hoping it would pick that up because it is the main news headline. You heard it touch on oil prices. I'm not sure whether that's a current thing. I saved the transcript here. So, renewed round of peace talks between regional powers. So this is out of date. We're 2 days into the war. So it's not quite bang up to date. And I was having a chat with it yesterday about the Anthropic issues with Department of War, them signing a contract with AI, OpenAI. It seemed to know about that, but it felt like some of the responses were just sort of reinforcing what I said. But it doesn't really matter. Point is, if you were chatting about this with anything that isn't sort of mega up to date, it would be able to do it and do it well. What I had Claude built with this was the ability for me to actually load this up with research. So my idea was, I give it text, PDFs, URLs, and it would load that up with context in advance and then be able to discuss it. Because I am not that happy with the technology, I'm not going to go any further with this. Certainly not for the moment. So it may be something I look back at in 6 months. But for the moment, I'm not going to continue with this project. So voice agents with OpenAI, and then there's a whole bunch of pages I was reading. They've got a quick start here, all this kind of stuff. So how did I build this? First thing I did was I had a really long discussion that's here with OpenAI. So essentially, this was a long back and forth. I'm saying OpenAI, I mean ChatGPT. So this was a long back and forth with me saying, how could it work? What's the technical constraints, etc., etc. And this certainly spat out all the problems around cost. So what happens is, I'm going to simplify this, and I think I'm going to get it wrong, but each time you have a turn in the conversation, it's kind of got to read the whole context of the chat. And so there's stuff you can do with caching how much context it has to optimize costs, but it's really, really important to keep context low. So where I was just talking about having research notes and having those upload, this was saying, no, don't do that. You do not want to chuck this massive chunks of context. It's got to be really, really small. So what was built for me, you can see it here, local architecture, LanceDB, vector database, to have embeddings that the client app can search into and go, okay, he's asking about this topic, what's in the database, pull those extracts out and send really, really small sort of chunks to the real-time API to have it respond to that information. So it's quite complex. It's a lot more complex than just building a kind of text-based chat app. So that's what a lot of this conversation was about. And for me, a lot of this was about, okay, I do not want to burn my wallet. So there you go. You can see this sort of flow. Start the episode, the real-time API session activates. There's this context, relevant knowledge management per turn. Then the AI generates audio response. The optional text stream, you can see that worked as well. Complex plan to manage complex plan to manage token use. Is it working that well? I don't know. Certainly in terms of the budget, it's probably tracking to the estimates for the model GPT Real-Time. There is also GPT Real-Time Mini, which is about a quarter of the price. So that would make it a lot cheaper, but that isn't as conversational. It can feel a bit monotone according to their documentation. I haven't actually tried GPT Mini, but if you wanted to play with something like this and do it a bit cheaper, that will be the way to go. So at the end of this sort of chat session, I had ChatGPT create a whole PRD for this. That's up the top here. So not that long a PRD. And then I took it into Claude. So why did I do it this way? I tend to go to the company that own the technology. So to have a conversation about GPT Real-Time, I figured ChatGPT may be able to recall that information and understand it better. I'm probably wrong. It's probably just doing a web search on its own documentation. Claude probably could have done it better, but that's the way I did it. I still think ChatGPT is very good in terms of having those discussions, having two AIs work on something at the same time. I think it's good. So ChatGPT wrote this PRD. As I say, it's quite short, and then I fed it into Claude Code and went, hey, I want to build this, put it in plan mode. Claude came back with, okay, this isn't straightforward. Asked me a bunch of questions. There were things that ChatGPT had sort of asked for in the PRD, which were a bit vague. So I actually went back and forth. So the questions Claude was asking, I went to ChatGPT and went, okay, I'm being asked about this. So this pre-production tagging concept that ChatGPT came up with, I didn't actually really understand. So I went, okay, sure. Tell your LLM this. And then this real-time token orchestration, this is really complex in terms of how it's trying to minimize how many tokens are used. Again, I got ChatGPT to explain that back to Claude, fed that to Claude, Claude built it. So about 40 minutes to kick all this out. Local Electron app. As I say, it's got SQLite and LanceDB as local databases. and then everything else is just going direct to OpenAI. You can see from the logs down here, like there's a lot of activity being generated in terms of this back and forth between having a real-time connection to OpenAI, it being able to detect when I'm talking, speech started, buffering, trying to detect when I'm interrupting. You can see response audio transcript. That's the actual text that's appearing on screen versus the audio. That's the AI talking. So that was useful to debug. So yeah, this is the tech. What else have I got in my notes? So I think I mentioned already, I'm going to abandon this for now. This is too pricey to run, and it's just not there yet. Give it 6 months. I'll dig this code out. I'll come back to it. I'm assuming the inference costs will come down. I'm assuming the quality of the speech will go up. I think the AI is conversationally a bit aggressive, assuming those problems I spoke about at the start with interruptions are solvable. You really do want it where if I go, hey, I know that, stop talking. I don't mean to sound rude, but essentially I want to be able to interrupt, and it just stops immediately. There's obviously technology problems with latency. It's still going to figure out what I'm saying. So it's never going to be, I think, like talking to a human. But I think it needs to be a bit better than it currently is for it to work well. So there we go. A little exploration into GPT Real-Time. This was fun to work on. I kind of hoped it would work a bit better than it did. We'll give it 6 months, try it again, see if it's improved.